Welcome to Your Health with Friends of Medicare. I'm your host, Bev Muendel-Atherstone, and I'm the current chair of the Lethbridge chapter of Friends of Medicare. This is our 10th episode of Your Health. And today we are joined by Bob Campbell.
Hi there.
We are very pleased that Bob has joined us. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
And about 2 months ago, Bob had the unfortunate experience of having a stroke. And Bob has agreed to tell us a little bit about that experience. So you're a longtime resident of Lethbridge.
I am. I've lived here for 45 years.
Well, that is a while. I've lived here 47, I think.
There you go.
But not all in Lethbridge. Now, you spent decades working in healthcare.
Yes, I was. I worked in healthcare for several years. Previously as a consultant doing functional planning for hospitals and healthcare agencies. And then later I was director of education at the Lethbridge, or the Chinook Regional Hospital, as it's now known as, and later as director of population health for the Chinook Health Region. That was the last job I had when I retired.
And you also worked in mental health.
Yes, I am the past president of the Canadian Mental Health Association, Lethbridge Region, Alberta, and national president of the Canadian Mental Health Association.
So you've had quite a bit of experience with healthcare and mental health. And then you didn't leave that. You had to continue your work in volunteer work with Friends of Medicare.
Right. I was on the board of the Friends of Medicare for several years, and for a while did serve as chair of the Friends of Medicare.
So it's rather ironic, you, with all of your experience in healthcare, ended up having a stroke. And had you and your doctors looked at your characteristics to see if you had any criteria that would lead to a stroke?
Well, overall, my health was good, and I had, I kept the regular annual medical checkup. I had none of the risk factors, general risk factors that they associate with stroke. However, on August the 12th, I was not feeling well and became quite disoriented and lost my balance. And to make a long story short, I was taken to the hospital emergency and was examined. And after quite a bit of consultation, at first they weren't sure I'd had a stroke because all the tests didn't indicate it. But then when my doctor recommended MRI, I had an MRI, and then they found that I had had a stroke, and it affected my left side. I was very weak on the left side, and to compound the fact, I'm left-handed, so that made it a little more onerous than ordinarily on the left side. So I was in the hospital at the Chinook Regional. I was in there for 2 weeks, and then I was in the post-acute rehab program at St. Michael's Health Center for a month. And I've been discharged from St. Mike's last week. It's been a week and a day since I was discharged. And starting on Tuesday, I'll be participating in the the geriatric community rehab program down at the Melcor Center.
Well, you've had quite an experience, and thank you very much, because we want to dig more deeply into some of these experiences that you've had. So I'd like to ask you first, when you were having the stroke, what did you notice? Were the symptoms similar to those that you had known about?
Well, it varies from individual to individual. A close friend of mine had a stroke almost a year ago, and he literally collapsed. I didn't collapse, but my balance was way off. I was disoriented, and also I had extreme fatigue, and just felt like, so I just spent quite a bit of time in bed, and then when I went to move, I just couldn't move. And then I could tell my left side was very weak.
So how did you know to go to the hospital?
Well, we phoned 911, and they came, and they did a very quick assessment, and they assumed it was a stroke just because of the characteristics.
So this was right after you felt dizzy and so on?
Yeah, as I say, I spent probably an hour or so just lying in bed, hoping things would pass, and they didn't. It got worse. And that's when we phoned 911.
Oh, very good. So you had family with you?
Yes.
And that's very fortunate because...
Very fortunate, yeah.
Yeah, because if you passed out, there would
have been a problem, and I probably would have had difficulty even dialing a phone at that point, because I was disoriented, and as I say, the strength in the left side was gone.
So when you phoned 911, or your daughter, someone phoned 911, did an ambulance come for you?
Yes, it did, and they were there very quickly. And they did an assessment very quickly, and they assumed that it had the features of a stroke. And so I was taken to emerge, and I was admitted right away, and the rest proceeded.
That's the good thing about coming by ambulance.
Yeah.
You go into the ambulance bay, and you are high priority.
High priority.
And especially when it's a stroke, I notice that's very high priority.
Yep. Yep.
Yes. And our ER has difficulty sometimes with only having one ER doctor on duty, sometimes two, but there's supposed to be three, but we are down to one or two. Was there any trouble with a doctor seeing you right away?
No, I had a doctor fairly quickly. They did the tests, the usual tests, blood tests, and so on, and CAT scan, and then the doctor came and talked with me. And he also consulted with the stroke program at the Foothills and started reviewing my symptoms. And that's what, as I say, then at first they weren't sure I'd had a stroke, but then when the MRI was ordered, that was confirmed that I had had a stroke.
So first you had a CAT scan, and then an MRI.
That's right.
Yes, and it's lovely that they're all right there in the hospital. This is a wonderful thing about the
Emerge.
CHR. It's everything's right there.
Yep.
They just wheel you down the hall.
That's right.
That's lovely. So then you said, then you realized it was the left side of your body, and you're left-handed. Do you want to talk about that relationship?
Well, for me, I didn't realize how dependent I was on my left hand until then, because I couldn't even lift my left arm at the time. And interestingly, strokes on the left side tend to be more quickly recoverable. That's a big generalization. You got to be careful when you say that, but there is some evidence that left side recovers more quickly than on the right side. And as I say, I had virtually none of the risk factors. I'm not grossly overweight. I'm a non-smoker, non-drinker, all those things. I'm not a great exerciser, but I do go for general walks and so on. And so it was kind of a surprise to me that I'd had the stroke. And when they did find it, as I say, it's just a very small artery in the back of the right hemisphere of the brain. So that was kind of a surprise to me. And strokes are supposed to happen to other people, not me. But as I said, sometimes the universe has other plans.
Yes, we all think that these things will happen to someone else.
Right.
So with the stroke being right hemisphere stroke, affecting the left side of your body, and these often also affect speech.
Yeah, my speech was not affected per se, except that even now, I notice that I have a tendency to speak more softly than I used to. And when I was in rehab at St. Mike's, I did spend time with the speech-language pathologist. And we did the usual exercises. Well, first of all, they assessed me. And so I spent time reading words and enunciating words and working on increasing my volume, because it was noticeably softer than previously. And so I now can say Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers fairly quickly.
Oh, that's very good. That's very good.
So, yeah, but that's part of speech and language. And the other aspect of that, of course, is a lot of people with strokes have difficulty swallowing,
Yes.
and they monitored that, and luckily that hasn't affected me. I've been all right that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's usually the left hemisphere stroke that affects the speech,
Yeah.
but you had some impact.
Some impact in that it didn't affect my pronunciation or anything like that, and but it was, especially when I was tired, I noticed that my volume was diminishing.
So that's more the
Yeah.
actual motor
Yeah,
aspect
right.
of it,
Yeah.
which is right hemisphere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you went into the hospital and then you were there for 2 weeks, you
Yeah.
said, what did they do in the hospital that was not done over in St. Michael's?
Well, first of all, they monitored for blood pressure and heart issues. My heart rate was sometimes erratic, and they monitored that. They thought perhaps I might need a pacemaker, but after consultation, and I was monitored for several days, and they concluded I didn't need a pacemaker. That was a big concern they had. And the blood pressure, I had never been treated for blood pressure previously, but they did. My blood pressure had first increased, and so I've been given a low-dose medication for blood pressure, and I'm still on that. And overall, I've been able to manage blood pressure quite well. But they did many things, and of course they assessed my ability to walk, and they measured all that. They measured my ability to use my hands, both hands, coordination. There's all kinds of tests about coordination and all that sort of. Tested my hearing, my eyesight, again, to see if they had been affected. So it was very thorough, and I was very impressed with all of the staff at the hospital. I was seen by several doctors, specialist doctors, and it was all good.
That's wonderful to hear how well our system is still working in spite of the terrific cutbacks.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing, and I've noted before, as I say, I've been involved with the Friends of Medicare for years. People don't realize we have an excellent system. Getting into the system is a challenge now at this particular time, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But when we're in the system, it is a good system, and I've heard people, complain about our system and that it should be privatized, and I try to ensure them if they were paying for what services we were getting, it would be very costly, and insurance would be prohibitive for a lot of people.
Yes, it would be tens of thousands of dollars for something that, like what you have
Yeah,
gone through with
yeah.
this a good 6 weeks of care.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up and all the ancillary services, speech and physio, OT,
Exactly.
recreation.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you realized the doctors told you, yes, this has been a stroke,
Mm-hmm.
what did you feel mentally? What did you feel about
Well,
that?
I felt somewhat relieved that I knew what it was,
Okay.
and then, but secondly, in my family history, we're usually people who suffer from heart disease. But then I remembered my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she did die from a stroke. So there is perhaps some genetic predisposition. And I also knew, I've known many people who've had strokes, and I knew that I was fortunate in that I still had some might dispute this, but my mental faculties were still all intact, and my speech was generally pretty good. So I was relieved for that. But it was a shock to me, because when I would be in bed, I would feel fine, But the minute I went to move my body, it said, "Oh, just a minute, you've had a stroke." And moving especially my left side, became very awkward. And things we take totally for granted, like turning in bed, to go from one side to another, became a big challenge. I had to get help to do that while I was in the hospital. So those kinds of things are a shock. And then you start thinking, oh goodness, I can't drive a car now for the foreseeable future, and I'm going to be depending on other people to help me. For a male ego, that could be a challenge. So I wrestled with some of that. Yeah.
Were you depressed?
I did not depressed, but I spent time mulling it all over in my mind, and I've always been kind of a strategic planner, so I was planning, okay, I can call this person for this, and I can call this person for that, and so on. So that was part of the strategic part. But it was also about learning. When I was in the hospital, again, male ego thing, having asked somebody to help you wipe your bottom is a big challenge.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I had to do it. I wasn't capable of doing it initially. That was just a big challenge.
So the humility.
Yeah, so there's learning that. And then, of course, the other thing with a stroke that a lot of people don't realize is, for some, your emotions become on the surface. They're very noticeable.
Yes, you told me that when I visited you.
And you can, and I was telling one of the staff that at the hospital, and I said, I tear up very quickly. And she said, well, we could get you an antidepressant. I said, I'm not depressed. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm filled with gratitude, because that was really what I felt at the time. Mm. Maybe I'm in denial, but I don't think I'm depressed. Yeah.
Yeah, so then with all these assessments that went on at the hospital, were these assessments what determined that you would go to St. Michael's?
Yes, they said I'd be a good candidate for the post-acute recovery program, PARP.
PARP, post-acute recovery program.
Yeah.
Yes, and you go into St. Michael's in the main doors, and that's to the left.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And I can't say enough good about it. It's an excellent program. And the staff are very, very competent and caring and generous, and it was a positive experience.
Well, that's
and
lovely.
I haven't talked to anybody who's been there involved in the program who can't say, they say a lot of good things about it.
How were you transferred from the hospital to St. Mike's?
I was taken by an ambulance from.
By an ambulance?
Yeah.
So were you still having trouble turning and things like that?
Yeah, I had some mobility issues, and getting up off the bed and moving would be a challenge. So they, it was all done by the ETs, and they did a good job, and I was.
So they wheeled you in.
Yep, I was wheeled in.
Yeah. Okay, so then you get to St. Michael's, and you're telling us about the PARP program, PARP, and the wonderful care you've had there. Now, when I visited you, we took some photos of some of the wonderful
equipment. And so on. Yeah.
First, maybe the recreation room, or
it's
recreation therapy.
For rec therapy.
And what do you do in that room?
Well, we did a variety of things. It's all, again, to increase social interaction, and to do things. For example, playing cards is good for mental acuity and so on. I said it was also a good test of your frustration levels, because a couple of the games were challenging, and I never was a great card player, but I had fun, and that was good. But then we played things like bocce ball, and partnered up with people. We did floor curling. Again, it's all about teaching coordination and manipulation, and like even handling cards. That's a part of the dexterity with things like that. And so that was a good part of the whole thing. It was the social aspects.
So the recreation therapy sounds like it's a combination of the social therapy, talking to others and being with
That's right.
others,
That's right.
and then the physiotherapy, the fine motor and
Yep.
gross motor,
Yep.
and the occupational therapy,
Yeah, they're all part of that. Yeah.
and of course speech, because you're talking.
Speech, yes.
Yes.
For example, in OT, and again, this again because I'm left-handed, and this was a hand that was affected by the stroke, learning to pick up poker chips, very thin poker chips,
Oh yes.
was a major challenge at first to be able to pick them up. I wanted to cheat and lick my finger and do it. I said, no, you can't do that. You got to pick them up. That took a while, but I'm pretty good at it now. Yeah.
Well, another thing that impedes that is long nails. I've noticed
Yeah.
having these long nails is a real problem of getting any real fine motor.
Yeah. So yeah, and these are things you don't think about though prior to a stroke, and then of course other things were, again in occupational therapy, they had me practicing walking with a grocery bag.
With a grocery bag.
Yes, and having a little bit of weight in it to see if I could handle that. They also had me.
Did you have a cane in one hand and
Yeah, I did at that time.
a
Yeah.
cane in one hand
Yeah.
and the grocery bag in
yes.
the other? So you had to
Just
balance.
to see how. Yeah, it's about assessing if you're going to be able to manage when you're released.
Mhm.
It's getting you ready to function more independently. And another time, they have a kitchen, and in the kitchen, I made tea. It involved, getting in the cupboard, getting some cups. It involved getting the tea bags. It involved getting water from the thing, and so on. All fine motor skills again. But it's all part of the occupational therapy aspect of it. Things you would never think of.
Lifting the teapot.
Lifting the teapot, exactly. All of those things.
Mhm.
Another person in the program, they had her make a salad.
Oh yes.
Show how she could do that. Just very simple things like that.
But making sure that both hands are coordinated, they're
Exactly.
working together.
Right.
You've got the fine motor and the gross
Yeah.
motor and the strength,
That's right.
because you don't realize how much strength you need for lifting
it's
and
true.
pouring.
It's very true. Yeah.
Mhm.
So they did all that. And then in physical therapy, things sitting in a chair like this, no arms, being able to get out of a chair can be a challenge.
Mhm.
But we practice that, and they have these beds that they raise and lower up, and they did all kinds of exercises, sitting, standing, and doing things like that.
So they really worked on your body core.
The whole core, yeah.
Making sure
Yeah.
that was strengthened, so you're not
Right.
putting too much stress on your back.
Right. And the other thing, and I texted our family group chat that I spent every day pumping iron, so lifting weights. They had you do weights and you do this and all the different ways. And these are not major weights, but 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pounds. And that was good. Again, it's building strength. And so, as I said, when I went in there, I couldn't even lift my left arm.
Yes.
But now it's, I can do it very easily. Not a problem at all.
And you mentioned this big bed. We took a picture of this big bed in the physio room. And can you explain how that was used for?
Well, for
turning?
everything, even practicing turning in bed. You do some practicing there, how to do it, when you still have some weakness and so on. So there's that. And then they would have you do some of your leg exercises, strengthening and so on. They'd do that while you're lying on the bed. And then the other would be getting out of bed, how you get out of bed, and then how you get up off the bed, those kinds of things. That's all part of the drill.
Now, so when you first came to St. Michael's, were you using a walker?
I was using a walker, yes.
And I think we have a shot of you
Yes.
using the walker. It looked like quite a nice walker with
Yeah.
big wheels. And
Yeah. And that was of course the one they had there. And when I was released, I got my own walker, and there's I only had to pay a small amount for it because there's aids to daily living, and they cover part of the cost of the walker as well.
Is that means tested?
Yes, it is.
It's means tested, but
Yeah,
the province covers some of it.
it covers.
So-
Yeah, some people get it totally free. Others depends on your income.
Well, that's nice. And then you also got a cane.
Yep. So that's all part of it. And I could have had, they could have come to my home and assessed it for like having a shower.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've mentioned before, our home was already equipped with that because my wife had Parkinson's disease, so we had already adapted the bathroom to be user-friendly, so to speak. So I practiced having a shower at home. I mean, I got in the tub or in the shower with my clothes on to make sure I could do it, and proper grab bars and so on and so forth. And so I was able to do it.
And you had a friend who had a stroke, a much more severe stroke,
Yes.
Don, and
Yeah.
he was in there when you were in there,
Mm-hmm.
and he gave you some good advice on getting out.
Yes, he did. He said to follow up with the program. It's called the the Geriatric Community Rehab Program. And it's, well, some people refer to the Bridges program. It's part of the Bridges program. And it's at the Melcor Center downtown. And I was there on Tuesday and was assessed. And I'll be starting that program on this coming Tuesday. And it's a follow-up, and it says OT and PT particularly, but also there's art, rec therapy, and if needed, speech therapy, but I don't need that, but there's other aspects. And so I was assessed for that and did a test, and that will, because they say from recovering from a stroke, the first 3 or 4 months are pivotal to recover properly.
Mm-hmm.
And this program is designed to promote that recovery. So it'll be it's a 12-week program, 2 days a week, for an hour and a half each time.
Well, that's really
Yeah,
a good program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's very
12
helpful.
weeks.
Yeah,
Now, your friend also Don mentioned something about counseling, that you
there's
could get
there's counseling available if you want to follow up and receive some guidance and counseling around your mental state because of the stroke. Because for a lot of people, it's a real shock,
Yeah.
and requires a whole new mindset about how they're going to function in this world.
Yes.
And so, and it can often lead to depression. So they have counseling available for people who want counseling. And it's all part of the service, too.
And you'll get counseling.
Yep,
That's wonderful. Now, I think Don said the person came to his house.
yes. I haven't followed up on that yet, but that was his experience, yes.
So you're a real proponent of keeping our public healthcare system
Yes,
public.
I am, very much so.
Well, thank you, Bob. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Okay, well, thank you,
Thank you for coming.
and thank you for
Thank you.
asking me. Yep.
Thank you.